Vir Krotoa. Die Kaap van Goeie Hoop het betekenis vir hom gekry toe jy Kwena skoonheid, koninglik, maar nog kind, daar op die wye wit sand strand staan en hy sien net jou slanke nek, die gladde blasvel wat oor jou woe bangbene span en die oë wildsbokkie onskuldig wat die betalje gadeslaan. En jy sien visioene van vraatsigtiges wat jou vee oor die koppies jaag. Knetterende vuur wek jou uit jou slaap. Vrede, vrede, skree jy in die nag. O Krotoa, beeldskoon en wys, maar nog kind.
Welcome everybody. We want to say Gangans, Kaisa Gangans. Thank you for coming. Kite says, hello, good morning. We always start events like this by paying respect to the First Nations custodians of this land and by acknowledging that we are holding this event on the traditional lands of the indigenous people of Southern Africa, the Khoikhoi and the San. If Africa is the birthplace of humanity, then we are all children of the Khoikhoi and the San.
So there are many perspectives on RW Wilcox. One should remember that at the stage he was the Chancellor of this university, both Chancellor and at the stage Vice-Chancellor. Also he headed up the institution. He was quite a renowned scientist in his specific fields and got acknowledged not only at this university but also internationally for his work. He grew up in a sense-making around human psychology that influenced his role later in the apartheid ideology as an academic, as a scientist, and became famous or perhaps infamous for two reasons. One is that he was the study leader of H.F. Verwoerd, right after the now infamous article written on the cognitive functioning of so-called colored women. Colleagues in the fraternity of psychology proposed that indeed the science linked to RW Wilcox is of an era gone by, and it is indeed time to rename this prominent building. So it wasn't an uncomplicated process. It was the most public process in name changing and finding a new name that this university has followed up to now.
The story of my involvement with the renaming process goes way back, and it started with the fact that I wrote a play called Krotoa van der Kaap, a collaboration between Volksoperahuis in Amsterdam and Artscape Theatre. So over the years, I've become intensely interested and involved in telling the story of First Nations people of Southern Africa, especially because as a journalist, I've seen that the archives are either just empty of our stories, or the history is so distorted as to be unrecognizable. And the history of women especially, and indigenous women, is almost completely absent. Krotoa was a young woman who was taken into the household of Jan van Riebeeck that everybody is taught about at school, but few people are taught about Krotoa and how she became a key figure at the Cape in the 1600s. She went to work in van Riebeeck's household at the age of about 10 or 12 as a young servant. And by the time she was a teenager, she had become not just a servant in the household, but a key translator and negotiator. Because in 1659, when the first war broke out between the indigenous people and the Dutch colonials, she became the person who helped them to restore some kind of peace. So she was a constant negotiator and translator between the Dutch and her own people. She was the first person to marry a colonial, Pieter van Meerhof, and she was also the first indigenous woman to become baptized in the foreign church.
400 jaar lang hamer dit teen mure in verskeie tale, tale wat jy verstaan. Engels, Hollands, Portugees en jou eie, dit wat hulle nie verstaan nie.
Krotoa's fate is one that is extremely heartbreaking. There's also archival record of how Van Riebeeck had fed the children in his care alcohol since a very early age because they were traumatized at night. This kind of introduction to alcohol at an early age, on top of which we strongly suspect that she was sexually molested because there's no record of how she became pregnant as a teenager and who the fathers were. And these things combined caused Krotoa to turn to alcohol. And at that stage, instead of assisting her, the Dutch took her children away forcefully and banished her to Robben Island, where she died alone at a very young age in her 30s.
Our history books somehow focused on all the negative parts of the human being. She played a very, very important role in all aspects of life. And yes, it was traumatizing. It must have been traumatizing for her. And that's why it's important that we get these historic figures and celebrate their lives and get to know about their lives.
O Krotoa, beeldskoon en wys, maar nog kind. In hierdie spel van onderwerping is dit nie die meedoenlose wat sneuwel. Hulle word veroweraars. Die diplomaat word verslaan. She needs the country and all its people to know that she was not just, a little girl, a woman. She was special. There are many people today who don't know a story and who tells history maybe from one point of view. And I feel that the naming of the Wilcox Building to Krotoa is now gonna rectify all those mistakes, all those injustices of generations that died long ago and who never knew about Krotoa. And we cannot let it go on. The generations living now and those to come must know about her.
We needed to learn and understand who Krotoa was in a fuller sense. We needed to learn and understand that we could not be the only voice involved in a renaming process, and most definitely then in the renaming ceremony. And we had to be guided by stakeholders from the First Nations in acknowledging the history and the legacy, the story of Krotoa, that indeed this university better understands its own story, its own role in history. And that, I think, was part of the significance. And of course, that's not something that we could do by ourselves. This process had to guide us to discover that. And in that sense, Krotoa came back to the university, or the bigger puzzle pieces that went missing along the way over the 100+ years history was found and became reprinted or fully part of the new Stellenbosch story.
This is a weighty name to honor. It is a weighty story. It is extremely significant, almost holy moment to enter into. And so they didn't take it lightly. We had the chiefs coming in and doing a ceremony with smoke and herbs and buchu water. There are certain deep and profound African rituals that for an outsider would seem messy and chaotic. But they are like that because they are powerful and strong things that have to set right extremely big injustices or get us off a very, very dangerous course that we have been on.
Khoi history is marginalized, and we cannot wait on anybody the common character for us. We must be present in taking out that history from wherever it is buried and bring it to the center. And the University of Stellenbosch has started with that, bringing the history to the center.
For me, it's really moving that we can honor a person who also symbolizes some of the struggles, some of the hardship that people experienced during the colonialist times and up until today. And it's a tightrope in the sense that you also do not want to appropriate the name, so that's why we really engaged with the First Nation people, leaders in the area. It's also complex because of her personal story, and so the complexity plays out at various levels. But I think it was intentional on the side of the university not to opt out because of the complexity, not to go for a neutral name just because we want to shy away from the complexity. The renaming has actually opened up various conversations and engagements and has created opportunities for us to grapple with some of the complexities.
That will be, I think, the proper celebration of Krotoa, that we know more about the story, her and the people, that we understand that our stories are deeply connected to that of Krotoa, and that if we don't understand something also of the painful history associated with that era, the Krotoa era, we will lose out on looking forward and understanding what we need to do differently.
O Krotoa, in hierdie spel van onderwerping, is dit nie die meedoenlose wat sneuwel. Hulle word die veroveraars. Die diplomaat word verslaan.
As I was driving in, and the first time I saw the name Krotoa on the building itself, it opens up history, it opens up discussion. And to see a name like Krotoa actually makes me feel welcome, because, you know, I went to university in the 80s and it was almost alienating. But I hope that it doesn't stay with renaming. Transformation is a very real thing. It needs to engage this entire community to be part of it.
What has been done here is a historic moment in terms of this university, but also for us as a nation. And so Stellenbosch University has to honor this, and it's a sacred commitment that they have started something very big.
I hope it is known that it is an attempt, at least in a very honest and open way, but we attempt to redefine who this institution is and can be in relation to the broader South African landscape, whilst taking into account that this university is and should be a global role player.